Are you a drawing beginner and you've become very frustrated because while it's been okay up to a point, now you just feel that you can't move past where you're at, that everything you draw is still at this same beginner looking level, and it's starting to really frustrate you and make you wonder, can I even learn to draw? What's wrong? I do the exercises, I keep getting results that now I'm not happy with. Or maybe you've actually been drawing for some time. You're not actually a drawing beginner anymore, or at least you don't think you should be, but the drawings that you're doing tell a different story. In my understanding of when we draw, and my experience both drawing and teaching drawing and seeing what many people have drawn and how they're drawing it, I feel like there's a basic reason why many people get so far when they learn to draw and can't go any further. And the biggest problem is it's very easy and in many ways quite natural to end up in this place. Let me explain why I think it happens and how to get out of this place and actually kickstart learning to draw in a whole more adult, for want of a better word, way. And I think the reason why we hit this wall where we learn to draw in a certain way to a certain point and then can't go any further goes back to our childhood. And it goes back to the fact that for most of us, our first drawing experience is as a child, possibly as a very young child, where we're used in reference materials such as cartoons or our kids' children's storybooks, the illustrations that they have, and we're copying them. Children learn by copying. And when we go to draw, it's therefore very natural that we copy as closely as we can what's inspiring us to draw, what we want to draw. And so we copy the cartoons in our comic books. We copy the highly simplified cartoon-like, probably, illustrations in our children's books. And our aim is to draw something that looks the same. The more the same it looks, the more successful we've been. We probably, if we do that well, get praise from our parents saying, oh, it looks just like in the book. And obviously there's nothing wrong with this for a child. This is how children learn. They copy. And in the process, learn great observation skills, great hand-eye coordination, learn what it means to have a project that they start, that they finish, and get some satisfaction from. The problem is then when we go to draw as, well, let's say an adult, but we could be talking of 10 years of age or 12 years of age or 15 years of age or 30 or 60 years of age. But at some point, not as this very small child who is still basically copying everything they see around them to understand and learn to interact with the world, but with a more developed understanding of the world and of the possibilities and of what others are doing and of what we might do, we're inspired to want to learn to draw in some more significant way. And the problem is, while I'm probably not drawing cartoons or very simplified illustrations from children's drawing books or very simplified illustrations from children's picture books, there's every chance I still have the mindset that fundamentally what I'm doing when I'm drawing is I'm copying from my reference. My aim is to get as close a representation to what I've got before me on my paper as possible. And the more exact it is, the better the drawing is. Somehow the more successful I've been. And this idea of copying my reference may work at the beginner stage when I'm drawing very simplified subjects, which unfortunately only serves to reinforce the idea that drawing is about copying what's in front of us. But at some point, my drawing skill and my aspirations develop to the place where I'm wanting to draw things that suddenly the way I've been thinking about it and doing it just doesn't seem to work, just doesn't seem to be enough to draw the more advanced subjects that I feel that I should be up to, that I feel is the natural progression. And it's because our understanding of what drawing is all about has actually reached the end of where it can take us drawing as an adult. And this is what keeps my drawing stuck in the cartoon phase. It's the cartoon producing mindset of copying, perhaps simplifying and copying, that served me well as a child, that now actually stops me developing my drawing sophistication, style, technique as an adult. And faced with this problem, most of us would naturally just try and knuckle down and do what we're doing harder with more effort, which sadly will probably only produce more frustration. Because what we need is not just a more sophisticated way of understanding the drawing process, but one that actually will enable us to create the sorts of drawings we want to create. A new way of thinking that will be the foundation for the drawings that we can draw for the rest of our adult lives if we want. And the way I've come to understand it is that I'm not copying what I see, but I'm translating what I see. This simple shift opened up a whole new way of thinking of what my drawing process was and possibilities for creating certain effects that will translate what I'm seeing from one visual language into another visual language. From a photo of all of these trees next to me, or behind me as they are, with all the grasses and the leaves and the profusion and the detail, which won't try to draw them the same because, well, we can't. The reality language that we see here, a camera may be able to grab that and say the same thing in a very similar way, but with a black pen, I have to find different words, different ways of putting words together, different language to say the same thing. I need to translate it into the language that's spoken by a black pen with black ink on a white sheet of paper. And just as when we translate a language, we don't say the same things merely swapping one word for another word in the new language. Sometimes we say things in totally different ways to get the same meaning. So when I'm translating from a visual language into a language that I can speak with a pen on paper, sometimes I change everything. I'm not trying to copy each blade of grass. I'm trying to say the same thing about the grass on the ground under this lighting, but I construct the whole meaning with my pen in a totally different way. I don't draw the grass blade by blade. I draw all the grass together, the effect of all the grass together. I draw the effect of all the leaves together. I'm not trying to draw, in most cases, leaves one by one. I'm not copying exactly. I'm saying the same thing in a different way with a different language, my pen and ink language. And I find this way of thinking has freed me from going overboard or being overwhelmed by too much exactness, too much detail, too much accuracy of things that in the end are so complex. I can never draw all the detail. But now I'm not looking at the individual tiny parts of reality, I'm looking at the overall effect, the, if you like, big picture view of reality that we get when we look at a scene. And I'm thinking, how can I capture that same effect? How can I translate what I see onto the paper? And now, thinking translation, I'm not thinking literal copying, I'm thinking effect. I'm thinking form, I'm thinking three-dimensional effect, which takes into account conditions, the lighting, the color, the angle of the sun, and so forth. And I find this way of thinking has, for me, so far given me unlimited opportunity to develop my thinking further, and therefore to develop the sorts of marks I put on the paper, and therefore to develop the sort of effects I can create, way more than I ever thought possible. And I think potentially it's a solid foundation for anything that I would want to draw. It lets me draw things that have a sense of reality rather than of cartoonishness. And ironically, it may even take less time and require less ink on the paper than a more cartoon-like understanding and version of the same subject. It's not necessarily about the time. It's about my thinking, my understanding, and how that guides and directs what I put on the paper. In fact, I find this whole concept of translating from one visual reality into another so clear that in my mind, I can actually visualize how my drawing is going to look. When I look at the scene, I can work out the sorts of marks I will use and how I'll combine them. In effect, I'll translate the whole sentence or the whole story in my head before I start to say it on the paper. And this then means I have clear direction from the very first bit of ink I put on the paper to the very last one. I can see what it is I want to draw. I can see the sorts of marks. I even experiment with them for a couple of minutes before I start, just to make sure that I've chosen the best marks or the best way of combining the marks. But I'm not caught up in trying to copy what I see. I'm not trying for an exactness of the detail. I'm trying to say the same thing in different ways to have the same effect, the same impact at the end. This shift of thinking has opened me up to what feels like an unlimited scope of mark making and ways of using the marks and effects to capture basically any scene, any subject that I might want to draw. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope this has been helpful. If you've somehow got stuck in the when I draw, I'm copying from my photo onto the paper way of thinking, then I hope this has been really helpful to unblock the progress in your drawing development that invariably brings. Or if you feel like you've been stuck with drawings that end up looking very cartoon-like, and this has been frustrating you, this is not the way you want to draw, then I hope this has given you some idea of where you might go to push through to developing what you need for the drawings you want to be able to draw. And if you want to see how this way of thinking, this translation thinking, works in practice, then any one of the hundreds of drawing demo videos that I've posted on my channel will show you. Yesterday's An Australian Bushland Scene is a great example because the complexity of the Australian bush is really impossible to draw on a copy mentality, but falls into place quite easily when we're thinking, I'm trying to say the same thing but in a different language. I'll provide a link to that video as the end screen in this one. So why not start to try thinking translation, try to see things in a different way, disconnect from the literal, shift from the idea that I'm copying shapes one after the other, and start to develop a way of understanding drawing that will take us to whatever place in drawing we want to reach. But in the end, whatever we end up drawing, however we understand the process and however our drawings look, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.